All right, let's get right into it. Today, we're going to peel back the layers on a European defense fund. And here's the interesting part. We're not going to use any outside opinions or analysis. Nope, we're sticking purely to the fund's own official documents to see exactly what it says about itself.
I mean, it seems like a simple question, doesn't it? You see a label on something like a defense fund and you think you know what you're getting. But, with these specialized investments, the real story, it's always buried in the details. So that's our mission today. We're just going to follow the breadcrumbs.
Okay, so our first stop has to be the most obvious place to start. What does this fund, the DFEU, actually say it is? Let's check out its official purpose, straight from the horse's mouth.
Okay, so let's break that down. In plain English, this fund isn't about some manager actively picking stocks they hope will be winners. Think of it more like a mirror. It's built to just automatically follow a very specific list, an index of European companies that make their money from military equipment and services. Its only job is to copy whatever that index does.
All right, so we've got the what. Now let's dig into the how. See, every fund like this operates on a strict set of rules, kind of like its blueprint for building the portfolio. And really, understanding that blueprint, that's the whole game. So the process here is pretty straightforward. It's a three-step dance. Step 1, it finds European companies that are in the defense game. Step 2, it runs them through a filter. It kicks out any company that violates UN principles, or, and this is important, deals in what it calls controversial weapons. Then, step 3, it takes what's left and gives more weight, more importance to the companies that make a bigger chunk of their money from defense. That's the rulebook, and that's what we're about to put under the microscope.
Okay, so we've seen the promise, we've read the blueprint. Now it's time for the fun part. Let's actually look inside the machine and see what this set of rules has actually built.
Wow. Okay, the very first thing that jumps out at you is this number, 26. That's it. Just 26 companies. So this is not some big, broad fund with hundreds of stocks. It's super concentrated. And what that means is that what happens to any one of these companies can have a huge ripple effect on the entire fund.
And if you look at where these 26 companies are, that concentrated bet is really spread across just a handful of key European countries. You can see it's really heavily weighted towards the big defense industry players in places like France, Germany, and the UK. Right, no deep dive would be complete if we didn't check out the warning label, right? And the fund's own documents are actually super clear about the potential risks. They even have to give these mandatory, hypothetical what-if scenarios for how things could play out. And to their credit, they're pretty upfront about the risks. We just talked about the concentration risk. That's the whole only 26 stocks thing. Market risk is, pretty standard stuff. But this ESG screening risk, now that's interesting. The fund basically says, hey, just so you know, our own filtering process might mean we do worse than a fund that doesn't filter. Pretty honest, actually.
Okay, now when you see a table like this, your brain might immediately think it's a forecast. But let me be super clear, it is not. This is something they have to show you by law. It's just a range of possible outcomes for a 10,000 euro investment. And look at that range. From a stress scenario where you lose over half your money in 1 year, all the way to a favorable one where it more than doubles. Again, not a prediction, just a way of showing you how wild the ride could be.
All right, this is it. We've kind of arrived at the heart of the matter now. This is where we get into the nitty-gritty, the most specific data they provide, the business involvement screening. We're going to see exactly what kinds of business activities are in this portfolio according to their own numbers. But before I show you the numbers, let's just pause and remember that one rule. The documents state very clearly that the fund excludes companies involved in controversial weapons, okay? Got it? Controversial weapons. Keep that exact phrase locked in your head. And here we go. To me, this is the most fascinating part of the whole document. Look at this. On the left, for controversial weapons, the exposure is 0. Perfect. The rule is being followed to the letter. But then you look to the right. Under nuclear weapons, the fund reports that over 22% of its holdings have exposure. So what does that tell you? It means that according to the specific definitions this fund uses, nuclear weapons do not fall into the category of controversial weapons.
And when you look at the other numbers, it just reinforces how incredibly specific these definitions are. See, exposure to civilian firearms is tiny, but it's not 0. At the same time, you've got 0 exposure to UN Global Compact violators, tobacco, or thermal coal. The screening is definitely working. It's just working based on a very, very precise set of definitions.
So, what's the big takeaway here? It really all boils down to one simple thing. Definitions are everything. The fund isn't breaking any rules. In fact, it's following its own rulebook perfectly. The lesson for us is that if you really want to understand what you're invested in, you have to understand what the words in that rulebook, words like controversial, actually mean when the rubber meets the road.
And that really leaves us with one final thought, doesn't it? This isn't just about this one fund. It's about any investment that uses these kinds of labels or filters. The question really flips from the fund back to you. When you invest, how do you define a word like controversial? And, more importantly, have you actually checked the fine print to see if your definition matches theirs?